This is a presentation to help students be as prepared as possible for the new Smarter Balanced Assessment Test. First of all, what's the difference between the new Smarter Balanced Assessment Test, or the SBAC, compared with previous state tests? First of all, in addition to regular multiple choice or answering questions in regard to passages read or math problems, there's also going to be performance tasks. There's going to be writing performance tasks and math performance tasks. So basically they are similar to work samples that we have done before. And they are scored with a rubric. And they're going to require the students to type and explain their reasoning, both for the answers that they put, the ideas that they express in their writing, and also explaining how they arrived at solutions to math problems. Let's see, in all of the parts of the Smarter Balanced test, students have to type, so having some keyboarding experience it's really a necessity for them to be able to be successful on the Smarter Balanced. Students need to cite their sources. In the writing performance task, they're going to read a couple of articles, and then they're going to write like mini reports using those articles that they read, and it's necessary that they cite their sources. The Smarter Balanced test allows them to just put source number 1 says whatever to support their opinions, or source number 2. But I believe that we might as well teach them the right way to cite sources right from the very start, having them use the author's last name. So instead of saying, for instance, source number 1 said that some astronauts learned to put things together and fix things in space, students could put, according to Yi, some astronauts learned to put things together in space. Or they could just say some astronauts learned to put things together in space and then put Yi in parentheses, just like a regular citation. This is preparing them for the future, for real writing tasks. In both the math and the language arts tests, there might be more than one right answer. This is something different. There may have been before, in the past, things that said like click D for all of the above, but in this Smarter Balanced test, when they ask questions that have multiple choice answers, there may be check boxes, and they will have to check all the answers that are correct in order to receive points for that question, not just one right answer if there actually is more than one. So here's an example of a performance task. This is, first, teachers will prepare their classes on a specific topic. So they'll find out beforehand what the topic is that the students are going to write about, and teachers will prepare them so that they'll have some sort of background knowledge about the topic before they have to go ahead and take the test and write about it. So teachers will prepare them, and then students will go to the computers, and they will have a couple of articles, 2 or 3 articles to read that somehow relate to that topic. And then there will be instructions to the students as to what they need to do. Notice that, I'll explain this later, but notice that there is a little green button that says Notes, so students can click on that button and type notes from the articles. I teach my students to make sure that they write the name of the author, or source number 1, or whatever it is, and then their notes, so that later when they're referring to those notes, they don't have to try to remember where they found it. And this also is an authentic, relevant skill, not just for the test, but when they're writing research reports and they're gathering information from multiple books or websites, they need to make sure that they organize where they got their information from, so that later they're not having to go back and dig through to find out where they got it from, so that they can cite their sources. So the performance task also, in addition to having students just write about what they learned, the performance task will have some sentences, and students have to go back and find where specific sentences came from, which source. And so make sure that students know not to guess, but to actually go back, look at the articles that are on the left-hand side of their screen, and scan those articles for keywords. So for instance, in this example, astronauts feel weak when they come back from space. They should scan the articles and look for the word feeling weak. The second one talks about them being able to lift heavy things. And the third one talks about the view they have from space. So they need to be able to scan and find the relevant information and determine for sure which source the information came from. So this is the writing performance task. Which source most likely has the most useful information about the kinds of work that astronauts do when they're in space? Explain why this source is most likely to have the most useful information about the kinds of work that astronauts do while they're in space. Support your explanation with 2 details from the source. If they don't provide 2 details, then they won't get the full points. If they provide 1 detail and they answered with the correct source for this question, then they'll receive 1 point. If they pick the wrong source to answer this question, then that would be 0 points. I'm supposing that if they pick the right answer but offer no evidence to explain why they picked the source, they would also get 0 points. Over on the right-hand side, you see that I have put the word because in big print, because that's the important word for students to think about when they are citing the evidence to support their opinions. They need to use the word because a lot. Okay, so it says put details from the story, tell why you know something, use the notes that you took in the notepad and the important things that you highlighted. So we're going to talk about teaching students how to use the notepad and also how to highlight. Okay. So here, this is showing 3 examples and exactly what was said and how many points they got. So in the top exemplar that received 2 points, which is the maximum, they provided the correct source in source number 1 that talked about the jobs that astronauts do in space. But they also explained why they knew that this was the correct source, and they offered 2 details that illustrates that point. So one of the details, it says source number 1 says that some astronauts learn how to put things together and become good at fixing things. That was one detail from source 1. A second detail from source 1 is talking about how some astronauts learn to be pilots so that they can navigate the rocket. The second one that only got 1 point is exactly the same paragraph, except they only gave the first detail, not the second one. The third example, they said source 2 has the most useful information about the work that astronauts do when they are in space. This source is the most important because it describes what astronauts do in order to get their bodies used to being weightless. Well, what they need to do for their bodies and to get used to being weightless has nothing to do with the jobs that they need to do. So what this is telling us is that students really need to read the instructions for the task very carefully. Make sure they're clear on what it's asking them to talk about. Here are some examples of ways that students can cite their evidence, ways that they can word it. So from listening to a presentation, students can say, according to the presentation, and then write what they learned. It was said that, I made a connection when the presenter or speaker said whatever, and this made me think. You could read through the rest of these, but these are nice examples written in kid language that your students can look at and just get an idea of how they can word their answers. Okay, here is an example of the notepad. Okay, so on the left-hand side, there's an article, and they're going to read that, and then let's see. Well, later it'll ask them to write about this. But the point here is that in the top right-hand corner, there is a green button that says Notes. When they click on that button, the notepad that you see here pops open. when you write notes, this is the students, when they write notes, they should know not to write full sentences. We want to prevent them from plagiarizing. So besides, they shouldn't be wasting time trying to type full sentences. They shouldn't worry about spelling or capitals or periods or anything here. They should just be typing little words, abbreviations, little things from the article that will trigger their memory later when they're putting these thoughts together in their own writing. And like I said before, at the top of this example that I typed, it says source number 1, and then I put Bergline, which is the name of the author here, so that later, if the student is writing about Antarctica and this ice fish, they'll remember, they'll be able to see that they got it from this particular source. Okay, so that's two main things to teach them about using the notes: writing just words or abbreviations, and making sure that they organize where they got them from, all the different sources. They will save and close, and the notepad will get out of their way and disappear, but make sure that they remember that when they're actually writing, that they can click on that and open it back up whenever they want to look at it, to get ideas, to reorganize their thinking, whatever. They should know not to just take the notes and then close it and forget about it. They need to go back and look at it. Highlighting. Students need to learn how to highlight important text. First of all, they need to know how to do it mechanically with the mouse. They need to hold down the regular right or left-hand side of the mouse button, hold on to it and drag across important text, then let go, and then right-click one time, and this menu will pop up. You can see down here it says highlight text. And then they regular click on it, and that text that they drug across will turn yellow. One important thing to teach students is not to color everything yellow. They often get carried away, and they like doing it, and so they highlight everything yellow, and so nothing sticks out as important. So they really need to understand the reasoning behind highlighting and learn to use it in a way that helps them. So that's talking about the writing performance tasks. This is the computer-assisted test. Okay? Rules for the students: they cannot skip questions. They can flag them. They can mark them later and go back to them later at the end of the test when they have time to go back and review ones that they were stuck on. They must answer all questions on a page before they go to the next page. So, and some of the stories, most of them, contain more than one question that relates to that one story, and they're all on one page. So you want to make sure that students know before they start that if they need to pause and go to the bathroom, they want to make sure that they finish all the questions on one page that have to do with one story before they pause and leave. Because let's say they finish 3 out of 4 questions about a particular story, then they pause and they go to the bathroom. They come back to to the test, and it's time to leave. The next time they come back, they're going to have to do those questions over again. It's page by page, so they need to finish a whole page, and then if they go to the next page and they leave and go to the bathroom, they won't have to do anything all over again. Test navigation, especially students get confused sometimes when they get to the end of the test. They just say, well, what do I do now? So it's just helpful and less distracting if they know right from the very start that when the test says you have reached the end of the test, they will see a red button on the right-hand side, and this will only pop up when they have finished the test. They should click on that. They will be given the opportunity to go back and look at the items that they flagged that they wanted to look over again. When they're sure that they want to go ahead and submit the test, they should click Submit Test. It will ask them, are you sure? They click yes, and then they log out. Here are some things that are asked of students a lot. That is, what is an inference? Students should know how to word things like, I infer that. And they need to know that an inference is something that you figure out even though it's not specifically spelled out. So I made this little example about a woman who had lots of pets. She had 2 dogs, 3 cats, a hamster, some fish, and a bird. She pet them, gave them good food, and took good care of them. So even though it never says this woman loved animals, you can infer from this paragraph that she does, because she had a lot of animals, and she took good care of them, and she fed them good food, and this leads one to believe that she must love animals. So, again, students should use the word because. They need to actually refer to the passage. Students need to know that when they offer evidence for their ideas, it needs to be evidence that's in that story. This came up when I was doing the astronaut example with the students. Some of them started talking about G-force and other things that they had learned that they knew about astronauts, and they were trying to use that as evidence, but that's not going to be appropriate for this test. They actually need to show that they read the articles and know how to cite evidence from those specific articles. So make sure that they understand that no matter how much they know about a particular topic, they need to cite the evidence that's in the articles that are given to them in the test. This acronym, RACE, R-A-C-E, stands for restate the question, answer each part, cite textual evidence, and explain your answer. It's a little acronym that can help students remember the process that they should go through whenever they're answering questions about an article. This is also part of the computer assisted test, and in this one, it's a lot like the previous standardized test, where they read a passage and then they have to answer questions. So in this example, students read the story, and then the first question says, what inference can be made about the relationship between the two brothers? What I see that's helpful for the students is for them to go down and read all the questions and all the answers on this whole page before they try to type their own answers there. Because if you go down to part A, that question says, choose the sentence that best explains what the use of dialogue shows about the relationship between the boys. So right there, if you read the answers, the answer is the top one. It shows that they care about each other. Well, the student can use that up at the top. They could say, I infer that the two brothers care about each other. And then they're going to have to tell why. They need to look at the story and say, I can infer this because in the dialogue, because they specifically, in the bottom, it's talking about the dialogue being the evidence. They should talk about what the boys say to each other that shows that they care about each other. But up at the top, if they had no clue what to write, they were drawing a blank. If they read the questions below and all the possible answers, then it's possibly gonna trigger some ideas that they can put. Plus, they can look at it for spelling. So part A, it's asking which dialogue, what the dialogue shows, which is that they care about each other, and then specifically in part B, they're supposed to pick the sentence that actually demonstrates that. What thing did one of the boys say that shows that they care about each other? So there's a lot of referring back to the text. Okay, here's another example that the students have to read. Then they have to read notes, hypothetical notes about something. And then underneath that, notice that the question says choose two sentences from the student's notes that add the best reasons after the underlined sentence to support the writer's opinion about cursive writing. Well, first of all, they need to figure out what is the author's opinion about cursive writing. Is he for it or is he against it? And then go down there and pick the sentences that support that. And luckily here they tell you there's two sentences, so at least they know in this case that there's two right answers. But that's not always going to be the case. There could be more than one right answer, and it's not always going to be spelled out to them how many right answers there's going to be. So the next one is a math problem, and this is what I mean. It just says select all the numbers from the list that are greater than 5 and less than 5.75. There are two correct ones, but it never tells you exactly how many of them are correct. These are just things that I reinforce with my students. With writing, they should give lots of details, things that the reader can actually imagine in their heads. Some of it is creative writing. There's one sample question where they have to continue a story, like write an ending to a story. So it's not always just going to be taking factual evidence from an article to support their ideas. There's also possibly creative writing required. The performance tasks for writing could be expository, they could be narrative, or they could be persuasive or argumentative. So you don't know. The students don't know what they're going to get as a performance task until the real test comes. They should use lots of adjectives describing how things look, smell, sound, feel, taste. Punctuation, and this is one of the key elements that was discussed in regard to doing well on the writing portion, is that students need to understand the difference between a phrase and a sentence. And that's a difficult, kind of an abstract concept to teach students, but the best way I can think of is for students to read their writing out loud, or like in a whisper, or in their heads if they can hear it. After they write something, that they should read it and listen to where the period goes and where a new sentence should start. But I do see a lot of run-ons that if they read it out loud and I ask them where to put the periods, they usually know. But when they're writing it out, they don't hear it. With capital letters, 3 things. Start sentences with the capitals, start names with capital letters, even middle and last names, or like the name of a school, like Lincoln Elementary School. Students will often only capitalize the first letter. And with the word I, and I put all the examples of the I words that need to be capitalized in the middle of a sentence. And this is one that often is incorrect when students write. Eliminating wrong answers in multiple choice. They can right-click, and so I've got a little diagram of the mouse. They need to right-click on the answers that they want to cross out and eliminate from their choices. And when they right-click, up pops a little menu. You can see the little menu there. So the last one at the bottom says strike through, and then it will cross out that whole answer and get it out of their choices. Here are some resources that you can use to help you and your students prepare for the Smarter Balanced exam. Here are key skills for the reading test: paraphrasing and citing, quoting according to and using quotation marks, transitioning integrated information into a paper. I'm thinking it refers to notes, and taking notes and putting it together into a paper that actually means something. Acknowledging counterclaims. So I suppose, especially in a persuasive essay, that the students need to bring up the opinions that are contradicting theirs, bring them up and highlight why they disagree, or what the weaknesses are in the other argument. But definitely not ignoring the counterclaims. They have to bring them up and discuss them and address them. And then finally, as I mentioned before, noticing the difference between a phrase and a sentence. Here are several links to practice tests that you could use and your students can use, or you can get ideas from. And that's it. I hope this helps and helps you and your students feel more prepared for these new tests.